There we are. Call to order, councillors. We're almost all here. So good afternoon, everyone. Before we commence the public forum, please check that all your mobile phones and devices are turned to silent. Thank you. And again, welcome to our public forum and welcome to the community. There's quite a large number of you here this afternoon. Public forum relates to the representation on agenda item matters for the ordinary meeting of council, which will be held tomorrow in chambers here at 9 a.m. As our code of meeting practice includes the live streaming, I need to inform all present that your attendance at this meeting is taken as consent to the possibility that your image and or voice may be recorded and broadcast to the public via our live stream. I also need to tell the people here that be aware of Council's Code of Meeting Practice in regard to any other audio or visual recordings of the meetings. Prior permission must be sought to the meeting and the decision to allow must be a unanimous decision of Council. The Acting General Manager will outline the guidelines for public forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The guidelines include public forum speakers have a maximum of 5 minutes in which to address council. There'll be no extensions of time. Councillors can at the end of that time ask questions of the public forum speaker. The speaker has a choice as to whether they do or do not answer those questions. The speaker may not ask questions of the councillors. They must also refrain from any derogatory language about any members of the community, councillors or council staff. If speakers do not follow these instructions, they will be reminded of these requirements by the Mayor, and if they continue to do so, they may be asked to take their seat.
Is there any conflict of interest, councillors? Councillor Shields.
Not necessarily a conflict of interest. I'll leave that up to the Mayor's interpretation, but I am a member of the South West Rock Sport and Rec Association, as I am the council representative.
As the General Manager would always say, it's up to the individual, but you've declared non-pecuniary insignificant. Thank you, Councillor. We have one public forum speaker this morning, which is this afternoon. Thank you, Councillor, which is Lee Dixon. And I've lost my piece of paper. He'll be speaking on an agenda item number something. Someone can help me. 11.4 on the South West Rocks high performance sport complex. He's neither speaking for nor against. If you'd like to come forward. Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question before you begin, please?
Yes.
This item is in confidential,
yes.
So he won't be able to address any item within that, will he?
No, he hasn't seen that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors, senior exec staff and community. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name is Lee Dixon and I work with and am speaking on behalf of the team at South West Rocks Country Club and the South West Rocks Sport and Recreation Association. My major role over the past 2 years has been to work closely with club CEO David Cunningham to bring new connectional wealth that will offer long-term value not only to the club but to South West Rocks, the Macleay and the Mid-North Coast. With this in mind, I would like to talk to confidential item 11.4 on tomorrow's council agenda, the Mid-North Coast High Performance Centre. Councillors, you will be more than aware that the Mid-North Coast High Performance Centre has been referenced repeatedly in your integrated planning and reporting for this term of council. Stemming from the OTM Sports Strategy and Master Plan for South West Rocks. Following the successful application for funding in conjunction with the amazing team at South West Rocks Sport and Recreation Association and the overwhelming support by Council, South West Rocks Country Club, our friends at the NRL, AFL, Mid-North Coast Football and South West Rocks Sporting Clubs, groups and community as a whole. Dave and I have spent a lot of time strategically positioning Southwest Rocks and the Macleay Valley to open up discussion about potential opportunities on the back of a stadium build. With this knowledge, we secured the inclusive Highlander Games on the assumption that the Mid-North Coast High Performance Centre would be completed at the end of 2020, and this has opened up more potential opportunities locally, nationally, and internationally. We know you will understand the huge economic impacts and tourism stats from the successful grant application, but I'd like to ensure Council is aware of the current and ongoing opportunities that have opened up with the stadium build, and therefore add a lot more to those number. Let me itemise a few just for your knowledge. We are in serious discussions with the National Rugby League about opportunities with the Canterbury Town Bulldogs, training camps, coaching clinics, exhibitions, and a number of meetings that are happening pretty close by, to the 28th of February being one of them. Is quite a significant meeting that's happening with a great opportunity that I can't divulge any further. The AFL said they'd love to have a centralised training facility for the Swans academies at between Port and Coffs. Plus, this facility would be great for women's AFL and would attract high-level women's games, which is a growing area, as I'm sure you are all aware. Football Mid-North Coast, the round ball game. 3 or 4 new events have already been discussed. Bruce is here this evening to support. He has already mentioned that one of them will in turn bring approximately 1,500 players and families to the location. There's a real opportunity there, along with junior comps and training camps, and I know that they have tangible links with the Newcastle Jets, a world's first inclusive Highlander Games, which you are all aware of, with an approximate number of minimally 5k people, and we're going to shoot for the moon on that one. Sporting music events and conferences, New South Wales sporting organisations, regional sports office space, yoga, baby groups, school carnivals, inclusive sports and inclusive sport regional location, and community meeting place, and initial discussions with Nancy Patterson about the potential of an Aboriginal language school for the Dunghutti language. The centre can be used for everyone from kids to the elderly. It provides high-performance pathways for our talented youth, Aboriginal kids who want to move away from home so early to chase their dreams. It will benefit local teams through the provision of improved facilities, but also bring regional events which will help boost employment. As mentioned, this is not just a sporting facility. It can be used for concerts, festivals, cultural events, emergency evacuation centres. The list goes on. I ask that you continue to give serious consideration to this project, and to ask that, if agreed by Council, a new timeline be communicated with the community, depending on what is discussed in the detail of the document, and so that we can discuss the opportunities to be secured and diarised for coming years. The vision for the centre, and therefore the profile of the wider LGA, extends into multi-millions of dollars, which would without doubt provide a quick return on investment, together with a handsome ongoing economic tourism benefit to the LGA as a whole. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Hawthorne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Dixon, you say you're in serious negotiations with the Bulldogs Rugby League Club and multiple other ones. The issue, besides being successful with that, is the accommodation. Has there been any examination of the facilities or the accommodation needs? If we are successful with the High Performance Centre, will there be an incentive for extra motels or accommodation having to be set up?
That's a great question, Councillor. Yes, I believe that there has been discussions that we have started looking at the accommodation provision around the area, and just not in Southwest Rocks on its own. So remember, we've also got other locations within the LGA, and here's the greater benefit that we're talking about. There's buildings that are obviously going up in Southwest Rocks at this moment, or are being planned to go up, so there's some additional accommodation. There's also opportunities that I don't think we're actually fully across in the Airbnb sector, which is far bigger than we believe when you start to go look at that. Also look at Hat Head, also look at Kempsey, also look at the requirement, if needs be, to work with our colleagues in Coffs Harbour and in Port Macquarie. I don't think accommodation is really going to be too much of an issue in the long term, maybe as a short term. Where does that link in with the NRL and the Bulldogs? Well, those guys are looking at looking at the potential of coming and training and using it as a centralised hub, a regional centralised hub. So there's accommodation that is available for them there.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. A couple of other questions, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if that's possible. The original plans, Mr Dixon, was for the Highland Games to be called the May Highland Games. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Can you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, certainly I can. There was a change of board over in Scotland, and they are choosing to be a bit more, let's just say, traditional in the way that they want to do things. So that's given us the opportunity to be able to grow the initial discussion and take that into a more inclusive and into a totally inclusive of games instead of adaptive.
Okay, thank you. Finally, you're talking about the Aboriginal Language Centre being stationed there. Have you been negotiating, or anyone been talking to the Dungutty people about that?
Yes, that's a conversation that I know the CEO of the club, David Cunningham, has had with, I believe it's Nancy Patterson, to one of the things that was picked up from the awards ceremony that was at Southwest Rocks was that the conversation about the Dungutty language and trying to resurrect that. How can we utilise sport and the potential facilities that could go up there to help enhance that? So if that was an opportunity, it's an initial conversation that started.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr Dixon, for your presentation today of the High Performance Centre. A couple of questions. The country club, is that true that there was a DA for accommodation at the country club, for possible accommodation to be built there?
I'm
No.
not.
That's into accommodation question.
I'll ask you to answer it yes or no. Just don't have to elaborate.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Is the design of the centre, is that something that the country club had something to do with about the design? Did you have input on the design?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Lee, thank you for your presentation, Councillor Dixon. That was wonderful. So we're talking about a project that seems to have gym facilities, so high performance meeting areas. And then I was just jotting down things then about South West Rocks in general and that sporting precinct. So there are fields, there's a pool, there are tennis courts, netball courts, golf course, bowling greens, 10-pin bowling, the beach, Arakoon National Park, and the country club, all in one precinct. So what's the feedback you've been getting from these state sporting organisations that you've been speaking to regarding how desirable it would be to have events at South West Rocks?
It is an absolute driver. And one of the things that is really quite attractive, certainly in a regional location where they're looking at expanding and looking at having regional centres and regional hubs, having everything in one location is really clear. It's a really strong connection point with those guys, and it's something that really stands out for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other thing, the Highland Games. So, if we were to not proceed with the High Performance Centre, do you think the Highland Games would still go ahead?
Good question, Councillor.
I know it's a hard one to answer just yourself, but what's your gut feeling as to what may or may not happen?
It not insurmountable, but it would make it very difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Morris and then Councillor Saul.
Two questions, Madam Mayor. The first one being a bit of a follow-on from Councillor Shields. And Lee, thank you for your presentation. I felt towards the end that I was going to interject and suggest a slight extension of time, which was not in our normal procedure at the moment, but the information you were portraying was worthwhile considering that if we had got to that, but you wrapped it up in a timely manner. If the financial imperative of this project requires it to be staged, which is a possibility at the moment, what sort of impact do you think that could have on negotiations with these other sporting
Can I
bodies?
just interrupt? Careful, Councillor. This is The report's in confidential.
It has been mentioned at the last meeting that we not go ahead with the tenders, and it was on the public record, and that we seek additional funds. So therefore it could be reasonably suggested or implied that there may be a need to stage it.
Yes.
Because of
well,
funding.
just you're on.
I'm not going to go any further than that.
Thank you.
That if the funding imperative required this facility to be staged, what impact do you think that could potentially have with the negotiations with some of the other sporting bodies and associations, and also with the May Highland Games, with the Highland Games?
Thanks, Councillor. A good question, and one that has certainly been thrown around in my mind. My initial thought to the question is, if it was staged, you would be showing intent, and if it was staged, then with some clear dates around that, then we can show the scalability and really give them the opportunity. Most of these organisations and these bodies are planning years in advance, and I think that's what we're going to here right now, is the opportunity to start discussing what's happening in the coming years. So to answer your question, if there was a staged strategy, then my suggestion would be that it's not as good as having that whole facility complete. I completely understand that, but it really does offer the opportunity to give some more meat on the bones.
And just to follow on from that, not the second question, but to follow on from that, if that did happen, what sort of quantum of facility would you see as being necessary? And do you think that it could actually garnish some additional financial support from other bodies that would be looking to use it into the longer term?
Could I ask you to repeat the first part of that question again, please?
The second part was
first part.
The first part. What quantum of what quantum of facility would the first stage need to be an adequate enticer?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think if there was an adequate enticer, do you think that there's a potential of additional funding maybe being sought or being made available from some of the interested parties?
Without speaking to the sporting bodies, Councillor, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. It's a good one, and it's one that should be asked.
And the second question was going to be the playing surface. There's still work needed on the playing surface. How pivotal is that in your mind, and how much of an increase in both playing surface quantity and quality is required?
There is an increase required, and I believe that there is an MOU in with council for that, and has been for a number of months to take the fields, the grass fields up to the next level, and to get a couple of growing seasons in over the summer to make sure that it does get up to standard. There are specific standards for NRL, AFL, and certainly for the guys at Football Mid North Coast. So. I think we're awaiting back an understanding from council on the MOU that's in.
Thank you.
Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Dixon, I was going to ask a question similar to my fellow councillor about staging, so that's been partly answered. The second question then, if I may ask, have you been back to a local member as a club and organisation to seek further funds for this project at all?
I don't believe that's happened, Councillor. No, I don't believe that's happened yet.
Thank you, because it was mentioned during the election campaign. I thought perhaps you may have asked for more money, that's all.
I think everybody was asking for more money.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor.
Second round, Councillor Dixon. So the question has been raised about accommodation, and you've mentioned some of these events that potentially could be held at the centre. So my understanding was that there were 4,600 accommodation beds in South West Rocks in the audit in 2013, and that was excluding Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know if there's any talk with council about doing a new audit in terms of accommodation beds, so something more, so that we had something more current rather than 2013 figures?
That's a great question, Councillor. Maybe something you might be able to help us with.
And then the other thing, Lee, or Councillor Dixon, I was going to ask was regarding employment. So it sounds like there's, you've rattled off a vast array of groups across a whole diverse, wide age span, and right from sport through to cultural events. What about employment? What sort of jobs do you think might be created from having a centre like this?
Wow, what a great question. I'm
And-
sure
and
they're
one thing,
there.
would there be particularly like any Aboriginal employment opportunities?
I'm sure there'll be plenty. I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities as and when these events arrive in the locality, and that would have to be both on a permanent and a casual basis to be able to expand and contract accordingly. But we have to start. Bringing these things in first, and it's a chicken and egg scenario. That we're really wanting to get the stadium up and running so that we can start to bring this. It's a multi-million-dollar opportunity into the LGA.
Councillor Patterson, then Councillor McGinn.
Mr. Dixon, I was just going to ask, just maybe your feedback, what you've heard about the progress of where we're up to with the High Performance Centre at South West Rocks. Is there anything that you've heard from the people of South West Rocks, or is there anything that the club wants to represent at council about, like the possibility of the funding shortfall, of possible actions?
I do believe, Councillor, that the club, as part of the application, committed to up to 420k, I believe, towards this. And as to the Southwest Rocks community, I know a lot of questions are being asked. There's a lot that's being fired back at the club at the moment, I believe. And obviously I can defer to the CEO and to the board. However, I do know that there is a lot of talk and uncertainty about what is actually happening at the moment. Hence, in my address about being able to give, whatever you decide tomorrow, whatever's in the confidential, to be able to then put out some form of communication as part of that to the community so that they get some understanding. Because I do know that the club is fielding a lot of calls, trying to find out what's going on at the moment.
I do understand that the monies that have been put forward by the club for the project, I do understand that there would be some type of return, I suppose, the club would like to get for their investment, which is fair enough.
Question, Councillor.
Do you think the jeopardy that return may be put in jeopardy if it was a staged approach?
Initially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGinn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a very exciting project, I must say. The whole community must be looking forward to seeing something come to fruition like this. My question is, with all the opportunities that you've identified, so you've identified the different sporting and cultural and social opportunities that such a centre could provide, how confident are you that the design and the scale of the project will meet that brief? Very, because all these organisations, Council, would not be interested in coming and moving to and bringing things to this location without having that comfort from what they've seen so far. So I'm very confident. So if I can just ask a follow-up question. I imagine such a facility, such a structure is going to be in place once built for a long, long time. If you could talk about the scale, is it something that could be large, should be larger or smaller if you were to look to the future? I'm trying to understand if the scale that you've hit on is the appropriate scale for the project, or if there was some flexibility there for larger or smaller.
I would suggest that the potential is larger in years to come. There is a huge opportunity. Again, it's that build it, and they will come mentality. Year one, you may see in a 700 odd seater stadium 400, 500 people, but you can guarantee as that starts to get through and people understand exactly where Southwest Rocks is and where the Macleay Valley is, that they'll start and understand that they've had that experience year on year. It's that year on year growth. So I believe that anything that is built should maybe have the flexibility to expand and to add on to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon. Councillor Morris, we'll go back. We'll go around the table again.
No, just one very short open question. Lee, when you were giving your presentation, you seemed to be a little bit rushed when you were listing all the organisations and associations that you had dealt with. I would like to give you a minute to expand if there are any that you missed out on. If there aren't any, that's a simple no, I covered them all. But if there's any other organisations or groups that you missed that you think are worthy of mentioning, I'd like to give you 60 seconds to add those in and mention them.
Thank you so much, Councillor. You're a legend. I covered most of them, but pretty quickly. There are some other potential opportunities that weren't mentioned, but the general scale of the organisations and associations I think I covered, and it would be remiss of me if I tried to put any other names in there just to look good.
There's no other organisations or associations?
Not at this moment, Councillor, no.
Thank you very much. Just before you go, and before we end public forum, I think for the benefit of the people that have come here and for anyone that is watching this, the reason this is in confidential, this report, is that it's submitted on a confidential basis as it involves commercial information of the confidential nature. It is a tender document that we are considering tomorrow. So if it was disclosed, it could prejudice the commercial position of some of the persons that are in the report and who supplied it. After the deliberation in the council meeting tomorrow, the full recommendation will be published straight away. So that's the process. So thank you very much, and that concludes our public forum.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.